The day I removed my wedding photo from the wall, I thought I was finally closing the door on love. I did not know I was making space for someone I had never expected to meet. I still remember the quiet sound of that empty frame resting on the table. It was not dramatic. There were no tears, no goodbye speech, just a simple moment in my living room in Oregon, where I finally accepted that the life I had imagined was not the life I was living anymore. My name is Claire Whitmore, and for most of my adult life, I believed love was something that belonged to another chapter. I was 56 years old. I owned a small flower shop that my mother had started decades earlier, and every morning I opened the doors before the streets became busy. I knew how to arrange roses perfectly. I knew which flowers people chose when they wanted to apologize, celebrate, or remember someone they had lost. I understood everyone else's emotions better than my own. After my divorce, people often told me I was strong. They said I handled everything with grace. They admired how quickly I rebuilt my routine. But what they did not see was the silence after closing the shop. They did not see the empty chair across from me at dinner. They did not see how easy it became to convince myself that being alone was the same as being content. I had spent 25 years building a life around another person, and when that life ended, I did not know who I was without it. I told myself I was fine. I repeated it so often that eventually I almost believed it. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, a woman walked into my flower shop carrying a worn notebook and a camera bag. She looked around the room like she was searching for something more than flowers. "I am looking for something that feels like a second chance," she said. I remember smiling because I had never heard anyone describe flowers that way before. Her name was Emma Parker. She was 39 years old, a photographer who had recently returned to our small town after years away. She explained that she was working on a community project and needed flowers for an upcoming event. It was a simple request, a normal business conversation. "Please?" That was what I told myself. But there was something about the way Emma noticed things. She did not rush through the store. She looked at the details, the handwritten notes beside the flowers, the old wooden shelves my father had built, the small picture of my mother near the register. Most people saw a flower shop. Emma seemed to see a story. "You built this place with love," she said softly. I almost corrected her. I almost said that love was exactly what had disappeared from my life. Instead, I just smiled and handed her the flowers she needed. After she left, I caught myself thinking about that conversation longer than I expected. I wondered why a stranger's words had stayed with me. I wondered why, after years of feeling invisible, someone I had just met made me feel noticed. I did not know it then, but that small moment would become the beginning of a journey I never planned to take. I thought my love story was finished. I was wrong. It was only waiting for a new beginning. After Emma left my flower shop that rainy Tuesday afternoon, I expected my life to return to the familiar rhythm I had created for myself. Open the shop, arrange flowers, help customers choose the right words when they could not find their own, go home, repeat. For years that routine had protected me. It was predictable. It was safe. But something about meeting Emma made me notice how small my world had become. A few days later, she returned with her camera and a notebook filled with ideas for the community project. She needed my help choosing flowers that represented different stories from people in our town. At first, I treated it like any other business request. I focused on colors, arrangements, and schedules. But Emma had a way of turning ordinary conversations into something deeper. "You always know what people need," she said while watching me prepare an arrangement. I laughed quietly. "I sell flowers. That is all." Emma shook her head. "No. You listen. There is a difference." I did not know how to respond because nobody had described me that way in years. Most people saw the woman who survived a difficult divorce, the woman who kept the shop open, the woman who never asked for help. Emma seemed to notice the person underneath all of that. As we worked together, I started learning about her life too. Emma had spent years traveling with her camera, documenting people and places that were often overlooked. She told me she loved finding beauty in ordinary moments. She said everyone had a story, even the people who believed they did not. I found that interesting because I had spent so much time trying to forget parts of my own story. One afternoon, while we were preparing flowers for the event, Emma noticed an old photograph behind the counter. It was a picture of me and my mother when I was younger. She started this shop, right? Emma asked. I nodded. She taught me everything I know. Emma smiled. I think she would be proud of what you created. Her words touched me more than I expected. I had not realized how much I missed hearing someone recognize the effort behind my life. Later that evening, I closed the shop and stood alone among the flowers. The room felt different. Not because anything had changed physically, but because I felt different. I found myself looking forward to the next day. That feeling surprised me. I had forgotten what it was like to be curious about the future. Still, I tried to remind myself to be careful. Emma was younger than me. She had a completely different life. She was someone passing through town, while I had spent decades building roots here. The practical part of me listed every reason why this connection was impossible. But another part of me, the part one had ignored for years, wondered why something so simple could make me feel alive again. The following week, Emma asked if I would join her at a local community meeting to discuss the flower arrangements. I almost said no. My instinct was always to stay in my comfort zone. But before I could create another excuse, I heard myself say yes. Walking beside Emma into that meeting, I realized something small but important. I was not just helping with flowers anymore. I was allowing myself to become part of something new. And for the first time in a long time, I was not afraid of a new beginning. The strange thing about new beginnings is that they rarely announce themselves. There is no special moment when you suddenly realize your life has changed. Sometimes it happens quietly, through small conversations and ordinary afternoons that somehow feel different from all the ones before. That was what started happening with Emma. After the community meeting, our project became the reason we saw each other several times a week. We planned flower arrangements, visited local spaces, and talked about the stories behind the people we were trying to celebrate. At first, I told myself it was only because we were working together. That was the reasonable explanation. But I started noticing the little things. I noticed how Emma always remembered details other people forgot. She remembered how I took my coffee. She remembered that my favorite flowers were white peonies because they reminded me of my mother. She remembered stories I had mentioned only once. I had spent years feeling like I was the person who noticed everyone else. I was not used to someone noticing me. One afternoon, we were arranging flowers for the community event when Emma asked me a question I did not expect. When was the last time someone did something thoughtful for you? I looked at her and laughed because I wanted to avoid answering. I am fine, I said automatically. Emma smiled gently. That was not my question. Her words stayed with me because they were true. I had become very good at saying I was fine. It was almost a habit. After my divorce, people asked if I needed anything. I always said no. When friends invited me out, I often found reasons to stay home. I convinced myself that independence meant never needing anyone. But spending time with Emma made me question that belief. Maybe there was a difference between being independent and being alone. As the weeks passed, our conversations became less about the project and more about our lives. Emma told me about leaving the city because she wanted to create work that felt meaningful. She shared that she had spent years chasing success, but eventually realized she was missing connection. I understood that feeling more than I expected. We came from different places in life, but somehow our experiences felt similar. We both knew what it was like to lose a version of ourselves while trying to become what others expected. One evening after closing the flower shop, Emma helped me carry a few boxes to my car. The street was quiet, and the golden evening light covered everything around us. For a moment, neither of us moved. It was a simple moment, but I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not excitement. Not pressure. Just peace. You know, Emma said softly, I think you forgot how much beauty you create. I looked at the flowers in my hands and then back at her. I think I forgot that I was allowed to enjoy it too. That night, I went home and realized I had been smiling for no particular reason. It was such a small thing, but it felt important. Still, I knew I needed to be careful. Emma was becoming someone I looked forward to seeing. Someone whose messages made my day brighter. Someone who made the future feel less empty. And that frightened me. Because after spending so many years protecting my heart, I was beginning to wonder if I was ready to open it again. For most of my life, I believed the safest way to live was to avoid anything that could change me. I thought stability was the same as happiness. I thought a predictable life was a successful life. But Emma had a way of reminding me that being comfortable and being fulfilled were not always the same thing. The closer we became, the more I started noticing parts of myself that I had ignored for years. I started staying open after closing the flower shop just to finish conversations with her. I started looking forward to the community project meetings, not because of the work itself but because I knew Emma would be there. That realization both warmed and frightened me. One Saturday morning, Emma invited me to visit a small garden outside town where she wanted to take photographs for the project. I almost declined. My first thought was about everything I needed to do at the shop. Inventory, orders, bills, responsibilities. Then I remembered something my mother used to say. A garden cannot grow if no one takes time to enjoy the flowers. I smiled at the memory and decided to go. The garden was peaceful, surrounded by tall trees and quiet walking paths. Emma moved through the space with her camera, capturing small details most people would never notice. A drop of water on a leaf, sunlight passing through branches, a forgotten bench covered with flowers. Watching her made me realize something. Emma did not just take pictures. She paid attention. She found meaning in moments other people passed by. You see the world differently, I told her. She smiled. Maybe I just slowed down enough to notice it. Her answer stayed with me because I realized I had spent years moving too quickly. Even when life became quiet, my mind was always somewhere else. Planning, worrying, remembering, rarely experiencing. As we walked through the garden, Emma asked about my marriage. It was not a judgmental question. It was gentle, honest. I told her the truth. My marriage did not end because of one terrible moment. It ended because over time we became two people who stopped seeing each other. Saying it aloud felt strange. I had explained the divorce many times before, but I had never really talked about what it meant. Emma listened without interrupting. That must have been lonely, she said. Those simple words reached deeper than I expected. 'Cause yes, it had been lonely. Not just after the divorce. Even before. That afternoon, I shared something with Emma that I had not admitted to anyone. I was afraid that maybe I had already experienced the most meaningful parts of my life. I was afraid that everything after 56 would only be about memories instead of new experiences. Emma looked at me seriously. Claire, your life is not a book that ended because one chapter closed. You are still writing it. I wanted to believe her. More than that, I wanted to know if she was right. When we returned to town, I realized something had shifted between us. There was a comfort I could not explain. A connection that felt deeper than friendship but too fragile to define. I knew I was standing near the edge of something new. The only question was whether I was brave enough to step forward. The closer I became to Emma, the more I realized that the hardest person to understand was not her. It was myself. I had spent years believing I knew exactly who I was. I was Claire Whitmore, the woman who ran a flower shop, paid her bills on time, remembered every customer's special occasion, and never needed anyone to worry about her. But Emma had quietly challenged that image without ever trying to change me. She simply asked questions I had stopped asking myself. What made me happy? What did I want? What kind of life did I still hope to have? Those questions followed me everywhere. A few weeks after our visit to the garden, Emma and I began spending more time together outside the project. Nothing felt rushed. There was no dramatic moment where everything changed. Instead, it was built through small things. A morning coffee before opening the shop. A walk through the farmer's market on a Saturday. Conversations that lasted longer than either of us expected. I started noticing how easily we understood each other. Emma knew when I needed quiet. She knew when I was pretending everything was fine. And somehow she made honesty feel less frightening. One evening, we stayed late at the flower shop preparing arrangements for the community event. The rain tapped softly against the windows, and the entire town seemed unusually quiet. Emma looked around the shop and smiled. I think this place feels like you. I laughed. What does that mean? It means it is beautiful, but it has been waiting for someone to notice it. Her words made me pause, because I wondered if the same thing was true about me. Had I also been waiting for someone to notice? Not my work, not my accomplishments. Me. Later that night, we sat near the front window with 2 cups of tea. The conversation became more personal than usual. Emma told me about the years she spent trying to prove herself. She explained that people often assumed she was too young to understand life because she had taken a different path. Everyone thinks experience only comes with age, she said. But sometimes experience comes from what you survive and what you learn. I understood exactly what she meant. Because despite the years between us, we shared something important. We both knew what it felt like to lose a version of ourselves. Do you ever miss who you were before everything changed? Emma asked. I thought about it for a long time. Sometimes, I admitted. But I think I miss who I thought I could become. Emma looked at me with a gentle expression. Maybe you are still becoming that person. That sentence stayed with me. Because for the first time in years, I considered the possibility that my story was not about what I had lost. Maybe it was about what I still had the chance to discover. But with every new feeling came a new fear. I knew our connection was becoming something more meaningful. I knew I looked forward to seeing her in a way that went beyond friendship. And that scared me. Not because Emma had done anything wrong. She had been patient, respectful, and kind. The fear came from me. From the part of me that remembered how painful it was to build a life with someone and then watch it change. I wondered if opening my heart again meant risking another goodbye. For years, I had protected myself by expecting nothing. Now Emma was showing me that expecting nothing also meant experiencing nothing. And I was beginning to realize I did not want to spend the rest of my life simply avoiding disappointment. I wanted to feel something again. I wanted to believe that a new chapter could begin. I just did not know yet what it would ask me to risk. The moment I realized I could lose Emma was not when she told me she might leave. It was when I noticed how much her presence had already become part of my everyday life. I had spent years convincing myself that needing someone was dangerous. I believed independence meant never depending on another person for happiness. But Emma changed that idea without even trying. She showed me that connection did not make me weaker. It reminded me that I was still capable of feeling deeply. The community event was approaching, and the flower shop was busier than ever. I should have been focused only on work, but my mind kept returning to Emma. The way she smiled when she talked about her photography. The way she listened when I spoke. The way she made ordinary moments feel meaningful. Then one afternoon everything shifted. Emma came into the shop holding a letter. I could tell something was different by the expression on her face. She waited until we finished arranging flowers before she spoke. I got an opportunity, she said. I smiled at first because I thought she was sharing good news. That is wonderful, I replied. Tell me everything. She took a breath. A photography organization in Seattle wants me to join their team. It is a chance I have dreamed about for years. I looked at her and tried to hide the sadness that appeared before I could stop it. I was happy for her. Truly happy. Emma deserved every opportunity that came her way. But a quiet fear appeared inside me. The kind of fear I had not felt in years. The fear of losing something before I even admitted how much it meant to me. When do you leave? I asked. Emma looked down for a moment. In a few months. Few months. Such a simple phrase. But suddenly everything felt different. The walks. The conversations. The moments we shared. I realized I had allowed myself to hope again. And now I was afraid that hope would disappear. Emma noticed my silence. Claire, I do not want you to think this changes what we have. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But part of me wondered if that was something people said before life pulled them in different directions. That evening after Emma left, I stood alone in the flower shop. The same shelves. The same flowers. The same quiet room. But it no longer felt like the safe place I had always known. It felt like a reminder that everything changes eventually. I thought about the years after my divorce. I thought about how carefully I had built a life where nothing could surprise me. No heartbreak. No uncertainty. No risk. But I also realized something painful. A life without risk was also a life without possibility. The next day, Emma and I met at the small cafe near the town square. We talked honestly for the first time about what was happening. She told me she did not want to choose between her dreams and the connection we had built. I told her I did not want to be the reason she stayed somewhere she no longer belonged. We cared about each other enough to be honest even when honesty hurt. As I walked home afterward, I understood that this was the moment I had always feared. Not falling in love. Not starting over. but discovering something beautiful, and having to accept that I could not control how long it would stay. For the first time in years, I was facing a choice. I could close my heart again to avoid pain, or I could accept that some people enter our lives not to complete us, but to remind us that we are still alive. The weeks after Emma told me about Seattle felt different. Nothing between us had suddenly disappeared. We still talked. We still worked together. We still shared the same quiet moments that had slowly become important to me. But there was a new feeling between us. A feeling that came from knowing time was no longer endless. I had spent years believing that distance was the thing that separated people. But I began to understand that sometimes the real distance was created by fear. And I had spent most of my life building walls before anyone had the chance to leave. I tried to return to my normal routine. I opened the flower shop every morning. I helped customers choose flowers for birthdays, anniversaries, and memories. I smiled when people walked through the door. From the outside, nothing had changed. But inside, everything felt different. Emma had reminded me of a part of myself I thought I had lost forever. I was no longer simply getting through my days. I was actually looking forward to them. One afternoon, while we were preparing for the community event, Emma noticed I was quieter than usual. "You are thinking too much again," she said with a small smile. I laughed because she was right. "Is it that obvious?" "Only because I have learned your expressions," she replied. That sentence stayed with me. Someone had taken the time to learn me. Not the version of me that everyone in town knew. Not the woman who ran the flower shop or the woman who survived a difficult marriage. Just me. I realized how rare that was. Later that evening, we walked through the town after finishing our work. The streets were peaceful, and the familiar places around me suddenly felt different. Maybe because I was seeing them through a different version of myself. Emma stopped near the park and looked at me. "Claire, I need you to know something. I never wanted to come into your life and make you feel like you have to choose between yourself and me." I looked at her, surprised by how much those words meant. "I know," I said. "That is what makes this harder." She nodded quietly. "I understand." There was no anger. No blame. Just two people trying to be honest about something neither of us wanted to lose. That was when I realized something important about Emma. She loved her dreams enough to follow them, but she also cared enough not to ask me to abandon mine. She was not asking me to wait. She was not asking me to promise something I could not guarantee. She was simply being herself. And somehow that made me care about her even more. A few days later, I made a decision I never expected. I started changing small things in my own life. I accepted invitations from friends I had ignored for months. I spent more time outside the flower shop. I started taking walks without needing a reason. I began creating a life that belonged to me, not just a life that existed after my marriage ended. Emma noticed the difference. "You seem happier," she said. I smiled. "I think I forgot I was allowed to be." That was the truth. I had spent so much time worrying about losing people that I forgot I could never truly lose myself again. But as Emma's departure date came closer, I knew there was still one conversation we needed to have. Because caring about someone was easy when they were standing beside you. The real question was whether that feeling could survive when life placed miles between you. And soon I would have to find out. The day Emma left for Seattle, I learned something I never expected. Saying goodbye is not always about losing someone. Sometimes it is about trusting that what you built together was real enough to survive change. I had spent so many years believing that endings were permanent. My divorce taught me that people could promise forever and still become strangers. Because of that, I had convinced myself that protecting my heart meant never allowing anyone to become important again. But Emma changed that belief. She showed me that love was not measured by how long someone stayed in the same place. It was measured by how deeply they touched your life while they were there. The morning she left, I stood outside my flower shop watching the town slowly wake up. The streets looked the same. The old buildings. The familiar sidewalks. The small cafe where we had shared countless conversations. Everything looked normal, but I felt different. Emma stopped by before heading to the airport. She carried her camera bag and the same notebook she had brought the first day we met. I smiled when I saw it. "You still have that?" I asked. She laughed softly. "It holds important things." I wanted to ask if I was one of those things, but I was afraid of sounding vulnerable. That was the old Claire speaking. The woman who always measured every word. Emma looked at me and smiled. You know, when I first walked into your shop, I thought I was just looking for flowers. I looked at her. And now? She paused for a moment. Now I think I found a person who reminded me that home is not always a place. Those words stayed with me long after she left. The first few weeks were difficult. Not because we stopped caring. In some ways it was harder because we still cared so much. We talked often. We shared pictures from our days. Emma sent me images of Seattle, and I sent her photos of new flower arrangements at the shop. We found ways to stay connected. But distance revealed things that being together had hidden. There were quiet moments when I wondered if we were trying to hold on to something that belonged to another season of our lives. I wondered if love could really grow when two people were living different realities. One evening, after a long conversation, Emma asked me something unexpected. Claire, are you afraid of losing me? Or are you afraid of believing you can have something good? Her question stayed with me, because deep down I knew the answer. I was not only afraid of losing Emma, I was afraid of letting myself believe I deserved happiness again. That realization changed everything. I stopped seeing Emma's move as the end of our story. Started seeing it as a chance to discover whether what we had was strong enough to grow. I began making choices for myself, not because I was waiting for her return, but because I wanted to become the person she always believed I could be. I expanded the flower shop. I reconnected with old friends. I started enjoying my own company again. I learned that healing did not mean forgetting the past. It meant no longer allowing the past to decide my future. Months passed, and life continued moving forward. Then one afternoon, I received a message from Emma. It was simple. Just a few words. I am coming back to town. We need to talk. My heart immediately started racing. I knew this conversation could change everything. But this time, I was not the same woman who had been afraid of another goodbye. This time, I was ready to choose my own happiness, no matter what happened next. When Emma walked back into my flower shop, I expected to feel nervous. I expected old fears to return. I expected to wonder if I was protecting myself enough. But as I looked at her standing there with the same warm smile and familiar camera bag, I realized something had changed. The woman who once feared losing everything was no longer the same person. I had spent months learning that my happiness could not depend on someone else staying. I had learned how to enjoy my own life again. And that was exactly why seeing Emma felt different. She was not coming back to complete a missing piece of me. She was coming back to share a life I had already started rebuilding. We sat together in the small cafe near the town square, the same place where we had shared so many conversations before she left. Emma told me about Seattle. She told me about the work, the people she met, and the experiences that changed her perspective. I listened carefully because I wanted to understand her journey, not just my own feelings. Then she looked at me and said, I was afraid that coming back would mean asking you to wait for me. I smiled softly. I was afraid that loving you meant I would lose myself again. We both became quiet, because those words revealed how much we had changed. The Claire who first met Emma would have hidden behind practicality. She would have found every reason why something was too complicated. But now I understood that love was not about losing yourself for another person. The right connection gave you the courage to become more fully yourself. Emma reached across the table and gently held my hand. I do not want the woman I met months ago, she said. I want the woman you became while we were apart. Those words meant more than any promise could have. Because she saw my growth. She saw the life I created. She was not returning to the woman who needed saving. She was choosing the woman who had learned how to stand on her own. Over the next few months we built something new. It was not perfect. We still had challenges. We still had moments where distance, schedules, and different experiences required patience. But we faced those challenges differently. We talked. We listened. We chose each other with honesty instead of fear. The flower shop changed too. I started adding new designs and hosting small community gatherings where people could share stories connected to flowers and memories. Emma continued her photography, capturing moments that reminded people that ordinary lives could hold extraordinary meaning. Looking back, I understand something I never knew before. I thought my life was ending when my marriage ended. I thought the most meaningful parts of my story were already behind me. But life does not work that way. Sometimes a door closes because you are meant to find another one. Sometimes losing what you knew creates space for something you never imagined. Emma did not give me a new life. She reminded me that I still had one waiting. Thank you for spending this time with me and listening to my journey. If stories about love, healing, and second chances touch your heart, please consider subscribing to this channel and sharing this story with someone who may need a reminder that new beginnings can happen at any age. The most beautiful chapters of our lives are not always the ones we plan. Sometimes they are the ones we finally allow ourselves to write.